Get ready to uncover the dark truth about Albert Pike, a man shrouded in secrecy and evil. A high-ranking Freemason, mastermind of sinister plots, and a true disciple of darkness. War is a series of catastrophes that lead to victory. Albert Pike. When we mention the Illuminati or the Enlightened Ones, we must remember Pike. When you want to mention the Freemasons, we must mention Albert Pike. When you talk about the First, Second, and even the Third World War, you must mention Albert Pike. He is Albert Pike, the spiritual father of the satanic Illuminati priesthood system. So, if Mazzini was an administrative manager and planner in the Illuminati organization, then the American General Albert Pike was the executor of the Illuminati and Masonic plans after joining them in 1840 AD. Albert Pike was born on December 29, 1809 in Boston. He studied at Harvard University and was a genius, able to read and write in 6 different languages. He later worked as a brigadier general in the Confederate Army. After the Civil War, Pike was charged with treason, found guilty, and sentenced to prison. But he was pardoned by his fellow Freemason, U.S. President Andrew Johnson, on April 22, 1866, who met with him the next day in the White House on June 20, 1867. Scottish Rite officials awarded Johnson the 32nd degree in Freemasonry, and he later went to Boston to dedicate his time to the Masonic Temple. It was known that he was a poet-philosopher. He was one of its founding fathers and the head of the ancient Scottish Rite Masonic rituals. Pike led the Masonic lodges in North America from 1859 until his death in 1891. In 1869, he was appointed as a prominent leader in the racist Ku Klux Klan organization. General Albert Pike was indeed a very evil man and a good representative of Satan. During the American Civil War, when he served under the Confederate flag, his army was composed of gangs from various Indian tribes, committing terrible massacres, leading Great Britain to threaten to enter the war for humanitarian reasons. As a result, Confederate President Jefferson Davis, 1809-1889, had to intervene personally and disband his forces. Albert Pike was one of the founders of the infamous racist organization Ku Klux Klan. He wrote its anthem and organizational rules. Freemasons erected a memorial to Albert Pike in Judiciary Square in Washington, D.C. Below the statue, Pike is described as the soldier and the poet. What many do not know about Albert Pike is that he was a follower of groups that worshipped Satan, indulging in their mysterious rituals, and it seems that he carried secrets used to summon Lucifer, the light-bearer, in all his rituals. Pike held the highest rank in the satanic group known as the Order of the Palladium, or the Council of Wisdom. It was founded in Paris in 1737 and brought to Greece from Egypt through Pythagoras in the 5th century AD. Pike had a man named Veldir Velis, who was his right-hand man in Switzerland, and he was also a former Lutheran minister, the leader of satanic Freemasonry and spiritualism in Switzerland. Pike also worked closely and directly with Giuseppe Mazzini from Italy, 1805-1872, who held the 33rd degree in Freemasonry, became the leader of the Illuminati in 1834, and founded the Mafia in 1860. Alongside Mazzini, Lord Palmerston of England, 1784-1865, 33rd degree, Otto von Bismarck of Germany, 1815-1898, 33rd degree, and Pike deliberately and persistently used Palladian rituals to create the satanic group that would unite all Masonic lodges together. Pike succeeded in establishing the new global Freemasonry, which serves the goals of global Zionism based on doctrinal principles. He founded 3 supreme councils called Palladia, the first in Charleston, South Carolina, the second in Rome, Italy, and the third in Berlin, Germany. He also tasked Mazzini with establishing 23 secondary councils distributed among strategic centers worldwide. These councils became, from that time until now, the headquarters of the general secret leadership of global revolutionary movements. When Mazzini died on March 11, 1872, Pike appointed another revolutionary Freemason named Adriano Lemmi, 1822-1896, 33rd degree, a banker from Florence, Italy, to revive and operate their subversive satanic activities in Europe. When Lemmi died, he was succeeded by Lenin, Trotsky, and later Stalin. The revolutionary activities of these men were financed by British, French, and German banks, as well as international financiers such as American banks, which were controlled by the House of Rothschild. In a letter, preserved in the British Museum, sent by Albert Pike on July 14, 1889, to the heads of the supreme councils he had established, Pike consolidated the principles of satanic doctrine regarding the worship of Satan. We must say to the masses that we believe in God and worship him, but the God we worship is not separated from us by illusions and superstitions. We, who have attained the highest levels of knowledge, must maintain the purity of satanic doctrine. Yes, Satan is God, but unfortunately Adonai, the name given by Satanists to the God they worship, is also God. The absolute cannot exist as two gods, and thus belief in Satan alone is heresy. True religion and pure philosophy are the belief in Satan as an equal God to Adonai. But Satan, the God of light and goodness, fights for humanity against Adonai, the God of darkness and evil. Albert Pike died on April 2, 1891, and was buried in Oak Hill Cemetery, although his body has since been moved to the headquarters of the 33rd Degree Masonic Council of the Scottish Rite in Washington, D.C. At the time of his death, Pike had authored one of the most important and widely read books on Freemasonry, a mysterious work titled Morals and Dogma. This book contains many of the ancient Scottish Masonic rituals and ideas. It was given to all those who attained the 32nd degree in Freemasonry. Due to this book and his other writings, Pike has been described by some researchers and Masonic scholars as the Plato of Freemasonry or the Pope of Freemasonry. Albert Pike's plan for world domination, the Third World War. This war, whose consequences are disastrous, it has become certain that this war will happen in reality sooner or later. Perhaps for the majority of humanity or the ordinary person, it is simply considered that the inevitability of this war is based on the fact that humanity never tires of wars, especially since two great wars have already occurred. This has led the world to believe that we are on the brink of the war that will be called the War of Wars, the Third World War, as the final battle, the one that comes in the last days. It is simply the end of humanity due to the immense destructive power it will have. No one ever talks about the Fourth World War. We are in the time of wars, a time where the number of the battle does not matter, whether it is the Second World War, the Fourth, or even the 20th. The rumors of wars have increased, and the threat looms on the horizon for this battle that has long been awaited. The tensions in the Middle East and the areas surrounding occupied Palestine and its neighbors, the supposed threat from Iran, the ongoing interventions in Afghanistan, and the occupation of Iraq by the United States and the agents of NATO are indeed closely related to the world and the possibilities of these wars happening. These tensions have imposed upon us two inevitable options for shaping perspectives around this issue, the issue of the possibility of the next world war. Either one is a Zionist, a Freemason, enlightened, or the opposite of that, and the choice has been left to you. Asking important questions about the nature of these wars and why they happened is prohibited. Questions that would lead the rational human being to the mysterious hierarchy behind these entities that control and govern the world. There is no forgiveness. We have been sold arranged and embellished stories about the history of the world wars, the first and the second, and they did not forget to paint for us the brilliant way in which all the smaller wars between them occurred, and even up to this day. The first golden star of the heroine of the story, and the protagonist of the tale, was of course the United States, always the good guys. They are the men who wear white head coverings, side by side with their angelic brothers from Britain, who always come to save the world. They authored story after story, and we were left to listen and obey, for we had no choice or opinion. And so we sat in the back of the class clapping for the hero and its writer. There are dozens of documented pieces of evidence, not only to expose the truth that the United States was complicit in protecting Nazi war criminals, and only the Zionists and the Illuminati Freemasons, but in reality, they were allowed to remain under the protection of the United States and continue their crimes for the benefit of the American government. Moreover, this group became the ones who possessed the economic, political, military, health, and social decisions. The Antichrist succeeded in his endeavor, and the plan succeeded, and they were able to become what they had planned to establish the first seed that this Antichrist planted in the heart of the world. In Judiciary Square in Washington, the capital of the United States of America, you will find a statue of a man unlikely to be honored in this way anywhere else in the world. A statue stands tall before the entire world, challenging all the weak and enslaved, saying, "This place where I stand is the courthouse of the world, and I control it, and I am the one who says the first and the last word." What my statue represents here is control over this American entity. This statue is of a man named Albert Pike, born in 1809 and died in 1891. Albert Pike was the first to predict and plan revolutions, upheavals, and revolutionary wars that would lead during the 20th century to the conspiracy reaching its final stage. He adopted the full thought of Adam Weishaupt and applied it in reality, especially Adam Weishaupt's famous saying that the end justifies the means. Pike had strange satanic tendencies that enabled him to tighten his grip on. He based his plan on supporting the destructive revolutionary movements of communism, fascism, and Zionism. In 1896, the Hungarian Jewish journalist Theodor Herzl published the book The Jewish State. The following year, in the famous Basel Conference in Switzerland, he announced the political program of the Zionist movement. Karl Marx wrote the Marxist vision and was the spiritual father of the communist theory, which was perfected by Lenin, Stalin, and Trotsky. As for fascism, it is a flexible term without a specific date of birth. Researchers tend to describe fascism as synonymous with dictatorship, but it is worth noting that the Freemason Mussolini was the first to adopt this term in 1922, after the First World War. The plan of Albert Pike was to complete the mission of world domination after his Illuminati Freemason predecessor had sparked the French Revolution between 1787 and 1799, the Italian Revolution in 1830, led by Mazzini, and the Philippine Revolution in 1896. Europe was teetering between falling under Illuminati Freemason control or resisting it. There needed to be a foreign body in Eastern Europe to attempt to wound the pride of and stir the anger of Western Europe, in line with the goals of the Illuminati Freemasons to complete the plan. Albert Pike sent a letter to Mazzini in 1871. The content of this letter was the ideal recipe for completing the plan in the coming years, preparing the world to accept the new world order, represented in a one-world government. He laid out specifications for the 3 world wars. It must be mentioned here that this letter sent by Albert Pike to Mazzini in 1871 is disputed among researchers and historians. For a long time, it was known that this letter existed in the British Museum. But in the late 1980s, the museum denied having this letter. It is possible that the letter was destroyed or hidden for known reasons. Unjustified media waves spread through historical television programs, claiming that this letter was the product of the imagination of an irresponsible journalist, with a strong emphasis that this letter does not exist. However, in a book published in 1925 titled The Unveiling of Freemasonry by Cardinal Caro Rodriguez, important details about the content of this letter were mentioned. There is also evidence indicating that the German police discovered copies of this letter transcribed from the original letter before the First World War. This letter contained the broad outlines of a long-term plan laid out by Pike to seize power over the entire world. And this plan contained the methods and goals necessary to ignite 3 world wars. As for the First World War, it was meant to give way to the Illuminati Jews, led by the communists, who were funded by the European family barons, to overthrow the Russian czars and establish the Communist Union in Eastern Europe and Asia, making Russia the central brain and the ideological base of the atheistic communist movement. The Illuminati Jews, armed with the trust of the Masonic lodges, paved the way for this warby, exploiting the strong differences between the British Empire and Germany. The great communist state was to destroy the other governments in Eastern Europe and other parts of the world, weakening religion and its leaders. The Second World War, its goal was to destroy German Nazism, increase the power of global Zionism to establish the State of Israel. It was also one of the biggest lies in history with the fabrication of the story of the Holocaust. Also, the power of global communism needed to be strengthened to control half the world. This would pave the way for the next phase, which is to create a force opposed to Catholic dominance in Europe and the Vatican. Additionally, it aimed to solidify the reality of establishing the State of Israel on the land of occupied Palestine. The Third World War has not happened yet. It was planned to erupt as a result of the conflict stirred by the Illuminati Jews between political Zionism and the leaders of the Islamic world. In this battle, there will be a great deal of bloodshed, and the losses will be so massive that it will end with the destruction of the State of Israel and the Islamic world, leaving the world with no option but to accept the New World Order, led by a one-world government. Just remember, 1. Create the problem, 2. Reaction, and 3. The solution. And Albert Pike concluded his satanic letter with the following: "We will unleash the atheistic movements and the nihilistic destructive movements. We will work to cause a general humanitarian catastrophe, whose infinite horrors will show all nations the results of absolute atheism. They will see its brutality and the source of the great bloody upheaval. And at that point, the citizens of all nations will find themselves compelled to defend themselves against that small minority of global revolutionaries. They will rise to eradicate the individuals at the heart of civilization. At that point, we will find that the Christian masses will have lost their theological concept and become aimless, with no meaning. These masses will be in desperate need of an ideal and of someone to whom they can direct their worship. At that point, they will receive the true light from the pure satanic doctrine, which will become a global phenomenon, emerging as a result of the public reaction after the simultaneous destruction of Christianity and atheism. In the end, only time will reveal the true extent of the damage this man inflicted upon humanity. Even Satan himself would stand speechless at his deeds. Though many historians deny these facts, history doesn't lie. Trace the pattern, and you'll see. Albert Pike was not just a statue standing tall in America. Discover more dark mysteries. Subscribe now for deeper secrets on history's hidden figures like Satanic Albert Pike.